Well, this obviously isn't my saw. This is one that belongs to my brother. Steel MS 290. What they're calling a farm boss, though I don't know when it became proper to. For people on a farm, you need a pretty good saw. If you're cutting wood, you need a good saw if you're burning firewood. And when they say farm boss, no. Steel makes good saws, has made really good saws in the past, but they've got into that disposable kind of thing, and that's what this kind of is. It's where you're dealing with a plastic case. And the problem he was having, he was breaking chains. So I told him, well, look at your clutch, your sprocket. Well, yeah, the sprocket is shot. So replace the sprocket, but with an aftermarket one that's, well, okay. See, in the first place, this saw is a 325 chain. They run that narrow chain, though it is a 50 gauge. But then they go and they run them really fast. That's Steel's thing. Run a little chain and run it really fast, and you just burn crap up. And that's why, like I say, you can always tell if somebody's cutting with a steel, because you get that, they got a heck of a power band on them. And if you get out of that power band, they just bog down because the chain is running so fast. So you get that, it just goes on and on. They can't just power through. They got to make all this fuss about it, which is hard on your clutch. It's just hard on everything. So when I ordered a replacement, and this is an 8-tooth, the one that came on it, I ordered a 7-tooth. Gear it down, slow it down some, so you don't get all that bogging and don't burn crap up. Because there again, now this is a steel bar, which is a bugger, and it has you can't grease it. And it's a 50 gauge bar, but she's worn really loose, and it's got quite a groove cut in here. So I've got the file to take that down. And then I've got this device to push that groove back together, get it back into spec. But if this would have been my saw, I would have swapped this out for, this was like a $14 sprocket. Well, for a few dollars more, Oregon makes a replacement sprocket that uses the ring tooth, which is great, because then if you got to replace the sprocket, when that gets wore, in the first place they last longer, and if it gets wore, it's $1 or $2 to replace the sprocket. Here you got to replace the whole clutch. That's something, that's a low end kind of deal. But like I say, Steel is into this and make a disposable saw. In fact, he has one exactly like this, a junked one, that I think the first thing that went out, I think the crankshaft twisted on it. Well, when he brought it in, they didn't cover that. The warranty wouldn't cover it. So he had him fix it, and it wasn't much later that the piston went out of it. Just scored up or something. I know it's got absolutely no compression, but it gets to be on a point on these cheap plastic case saws where you got to kind of cut your losses on putting money into them. You could, like, the steel piston cylinder would cost way too much, more than the saw is worth, more than it was worth new. But you can buy the aftermarket ones, which is something I should mention too. You got to watch a lot of times. Like on eBay, you'll see where somebody will say, oh, they got a rebuilt saw. Well, they're rebuilding them with aftermarket Chinese parts. you got to be a little careful about that. You know, it isn't like, because nobody's going to go and put a new steel piston in. They're going to put an aftermarket Chinese one in. You know, that stuff is cheap. So that other saw, you know, I could rebuild it, but, you know, there's no point in it, really. You know, I like to get them away from steel sometime. Like I said, they can make good saws, but it's like Husqvarna does the same thing, where they make that lower line of saws too. They make the good professional grade saws, the commercial ones, which they all used to be. You know, like my 55 Rancher and my 51, they're the same power range as what this one is, but they cut circles around this thing. You know, it's just a whole different saw where you got the magnesium case. You got, you know, they come with this kind of setup on the sprocket. You know, it just, like I said, these are disposable saws, but I'm sure it's because they wanted to be able to compete with companies that are putting out the low line, but you really dilute your brand when you do that sort of thing. You know, I really hate to see that. But it isn't just saws that do that, you know, and all kind of manufacturing. They get a good reputation, and then they just trash it by putting out substandard stuff that isn't up to their old. Because I know I've cut with people who have steels, the older steels, and they're great. They're a good saw. It's not something I'm into, but I'm certainly not into these new ones of this, you know, consumer level type of saw. You know, if you're going to buy one, you either got to buy, if you're going to buy a saw, you either got to buy a pro model, you know, the commercial grade one, or look for an older saw when they were all made that way. You know, because these, they're a little better than the Chinese knockoff that you can buy for $100. Because they make one very similar to this, the Chinese one. It's a $100 saw. Well, even my 372 Husqvarna, they make a Chinese kit for like $300, where you buy all the parts to put a saw that's supposed to be a 372 together. Well, if you ever look on them, you know, like Steel and Husqvarna are normally running a 50-to-1 oil ratio. Well, you have to run like 20-to-1 on them, so you know the metallurgy isn't quite up to snuff. But I guess, you know, if you have a really good product, you got to be kind of flattered if somebody is going to the bother of making a knockoff of it. But I would certainly stay away from them. But like I say, if you're going to buy a saw, look for, you know, if you can't spring for the pro model, you know, unless you're like a homeowner's got a few trees that fall down and you want to cut a pickup load of firewood a year. But if you're doing any serious cutting, you really don't want to get involved in these. You know, it's just a minefield. If this is my saw, what I would do, I would have changed it, you know, because Oregon makes that different clutch. Jump this up to the 3/8 inch instead of the 325. Those heavier chains just last longer, stay sharp longer. You know, don't cost you a heck of a lot more, but just work a lot better. And, you know, gear this down a little bit, because that just annoys me with steel. They've always done that. They've always been that high revving, burn themselves up, you know, where you see somebody cutting and smoke is rolling off the bar, you know, because it isn't getting enough oil for the speed that it's trying to cut at, and then it's doing all this bog and stuff where it isn't getting any oil, you know. But he's into these until I get him to see some light. He'll probably stick with them. You know, it's the kind of thing where you're going on the previous reputation of a company. You know, but not my thing. But like I say, I geared her down, and we'll see. You won't even notice it, I'm sure. You know, going from 8 to 7, it's going to cut better. It's going to cut smoother. But he probably won't realize that there's something different. Well, he might realize there's something different, but he won't realize that it isn't doing the bog and stuff. But this, you know, and the fact that you can't grease them, that's just nonsense. But she is wore, and this bar has been flipped, so I got to cut both sides to get them level again. And then she, like I say, she's bulged way out. You know, so it'll be a little bit of a job, but you could have, you know, for a little bit of money, you could, you know, like I say, you could upgrade it to the Oregon Power Mate system and put the bigger chain on. But no matter what you do, you still got a plastic case saw. You know, where if you go and tighten these nuts down too much, you can actually pull in studs right out of there. You know, that's a low-end design. And if you've got a name that you're proud of, you don't go putting that low-end crap on a saw. You know, it would have cost them so little more money to make a really good saw out of it. You know, the thing runs good, except like I say, his other one with a crankshaft. I think it shifted on the journal or something, and then he brought it in and they wouldn't cover it. And then he scored it up. So now he's got a part saw, but you know, it's good to have a part saw, but that's a tough way to get one. You know, I know a guy who's got, you know, some people treat saws like disposable items, you know, and I know a guy who's got some steels that he runs them until they quit or has a problem with them, then he buys another one. I should pick up all his old saws, because some of them are the older ones that are very well built. You know, but if you're looking for a saw, all you gotta do is, if you see that star sprocket drive, you know you're dealing with something low end. The spur drive. You really want to see that ring that you can easily replace. And like I say, on my 55 Rancher, that's what I did, is I geared her down, slow the chain down, run a sharp chain, and run her a little bit slower. It saves wear and tear and everything. I know the first chainsaw I ever had was a Craftsman, and that one actually had, it came off the clutch, there was a gear drive that reduced the speed down, and then it went to the sprocket, you know. But that was a good idea in a way, you know, to keep that chain speed down a little bit. Yeah, but people, you know, I know people want to speed. They think speed is the ticket, but it isn't. All you got to do is listen to somebody running one of them, and they're going there, you know, and screaming and dying, and they're peaky little things in the first place. So you put that uneven load on them. But yeah, I can get it back together, you know, and get it working good as new. But that ain't saying much.